I love the Yakuza series, and if you're watching this video, you probably do too. It's a playable Japanese soap opera with, in my opinion, some of the most satisfying and fun combat in gaming. I've been a fan of the series for a few years now, starting back in 2020 when I tried out Yakuza Kiwami, solely because it was free with Xbox Live Gold. Since then, I've played nearly every game in the series, a few multiple times, but excluding some Japanese exclusives and Dead Souls. I loved playing through all of the games, even though some can be a bit more annoying to get through sometimes. The spin-offs are all great too, and specifically the Judgment games were a ton of fun to play through and some of my favorites. Over these years, I've seen this series go from a niche Japanese action game in the West to one of the most popular in gaming worldwide, and I've loved seeing RGG get the success and attention that they've rightfully deserved. I say all of this to say, the Prime Video adaptation was very disappointing as a longtime fan of the series, and in this video I'll explain why I, and as I've seen, many other fans are unhappy with this portrayal. This review will contain spoilers for both Yakuza 1 and the show. Like a Dragon Yakuza may share the same name as the series, but the adaptation feels very different to the games. Through the 6 episodes that it unfolds, almost none of it feels like Yakuza. From the very first minute of the show's opening, players tuning into the show will recognize that this adaptation is going to be a very different portrayal of the Dragon of Dojima. The show takes place across 2 timelines, 1995 and 2005, showing us both the past and present of each character before Kiryu goes to prison. This kind of storytelling can be very confusing, especially with how quickly the show chooses to bounce back and forth between the two every episode. The show very loosely retells the story of the first game, loosely being the key word there. Many characters from the series are in the show, but feel off or different here. Kiryu, played by Ryoma Takeuchi, shares some similarities with the Kiryu of the games, but never fully embodies the character. His acting isn't bad by any means. In fact, he's a great actor, but he just doesn't feel like Kiryu. Maybe that's intentional. I know there was all that drama before the show even came out about how the actors were told not to play the games, and sure, I honestly don't care. But I think that characters should still feel like their counterparts unless they are represented better, written and portrayed differently. Unfortunately, these versions of these beloved characters in the show are certainly not better, so what was the point? Nishiki and Yumi especially share similar problems. Yumi, Kiryu's main love interest in the game, is a completely different character here. And I wouldn't mind if it served the story better, but it doesn't. She is similar to the game version of the character in name and relationship to Kiryu and Nishiki, but beyond that she might as well have been a different character altogether. Her and Kiryu have zero chemistry, and it's a shame. Also, the choice to make Reina unrelated to the main trio was such a missed opportunity. The love triangle of sorts between Kiryu, Yumi, Reina, and Nishiki was so interesting, but could have been developed further in Yakuza Kiwami. The show misses that chance and instead makes Nishiki jealous of Yumi and Kiryu in 1995 for just a brief moment, and then goes on to do nothing with it. It's especially confusing because these changes were made just for the show to be mid in the end. And I mean mid. This show isn't the worst thing ever, as some people in the community have claimed. It's fine. It's okay. The first few episodes can definitely be boring to sit through, but as it goes on, it ends up just decent. Not great, not awful, just a 6 out of 10. And that's a damn shame, when something with the proper care using this series could have been so much more. Fan favorite characters like Majima, Haruka, and Saejima are all sidelined and not given really anything to do. Although they appear in a few episodes, it seems like the writers had no idea what to do with them. Haruka is one of the most important characters in that original game, but within the show, she is relegated to a plot device. Characters often have changed backstories and personalities in the show that will definitely be hard for fans to ignore as the show progresses. In the video games, combat is known for being brutal and visceral, with players using heat actions to spice up fights and take down enemies with style. This adaptation removed heat entirely, with my guess being to reinforce the more realistic tone that they're going for. I don't think this attempt for realism is a bad thing either, but the trade-offs to achieve that seem to have been for the worse rather than for the better. As mentioned before, the action sequences in the show leave much to be desired, especially when compared to the dynamic combat that defines the games. Many action scenes are hard to follow because of quick editing and shaky cinematography. This problem mainly affects the first few episodes, with the final few doing a better job of capturing the fights. Even still, the games far outshine the adaptation in action, which was a given, but they still should have made it a higher priority to get it right when the series is so deeply rooted in it. Although unfaithful to the games, this retelling is by no means an all bad experience. The sets, costumes, and cinematography, for the most part, are all handled pretty well, and Kamurochō as a city looks and feels great. Besides some underwhelming and often incomprehensible action scenes, the show is basically always nice to look at. The early episodes can feel slow, but the pace picks up as it continues. By the final episodes, the adaptation manages to be much more entertaining. but most fans probably won't stick around long enough to see it find its footing. The show also ends very differently than the first game, concluding with a cliffhanger and unsolved plot points that could carry over into a possible second season. At this point in time, I'm really unsure if this show is going to get one, but I'd hope that if it does, they would try a lot harder to get Yakuza right. The choices made to alter the narrative and characters raise the question, who is this show even for? Like a Dragon Yakuza often feels like an unrelated Japanese crime drama with a Yakuza theme placed on top of it. The show is definitely not strong enough to bring new fans into the franchise, but also abandons longtime fans by changing the story and characters for something worse. Without the Like a Dragon or Yakuza title, this show would definitely fly under the radar and have no audience to watch it. The 2007 film adaptation by Takashi Miike does a much better job capturing the nature of the games. And even though far from a masterpiece, I would much rather rewatch that film than sit through this show again. After finishing the show, it made me realize how much missed potential there was. For the longest time, I've been waiting for a proper adaptation of this series in another medium. For a while, it was rumored we would get a new film adaptation, but earlier this year the show was announced. I held out hope that they would do a great job with it, especially after seeing how Prime Video handled the Fallout show, which you could see my thoughts on in the past video. Unfortunately, this adaptation is nowhere near as good as that one was. The Fallout show made me care about Fallout when before watching it, I didn't. The Yakuza show just left me feeling disappointed. The series means so much to me, and in all honesty, I just wanted an adaptation so that others could experience that same enjoyment for these characters in this world without the barriers to entry of a video game. I wanted a way to take my hands off the controller and still step into Kiryu's world, with the constant moral battles that the series loves to tell. But that's not what we got. I have a hard time believing that people will watch this show and fall in love with these characters the way I did back in 2020. The Dragon of Dojima isn't even Kiryu's earned title in this adaptation, merely a title given to the champion of Dojima's underground fighting ring, which Kiryu in the show wants to become. Nishiki ends up being a serial killer who carves pentagrams into his victims for some reason. Yumi hates Kiryu once he gets back from prison and treats him horribly. Mizuki is no longer Yumi's fake persona and is instead her real sister Aiko, who is also Haruka's real mother in the adaptation. Haruka is just there, which is the opposite of her bold and strong-willed nature of the games. Majima shows up for like 15 minutes and is basically completely unsubstantial. He's given an awful action scene with Kiryu and Nishiki and then vanishes until the final episode where he barely does anything. Saejima isn't even there. He might as well have not been in the show at all the way he was utilized. It's honestly a disservice and disrespectful the way Saejima is placed here. He literally does nothing, gets shot, then continues to do nothing. I explain all of that to say, this was not the adaptation that the series deserved. We could have gotten something truly great. We could have given this series more fans and attention to enjoy Kiryu's emotional saga, but instead we were given nothing. The final episode is the best of the 6, and yet still falls flat in emotional weight. The fight at the top of the now very stupid looking Millennium Tower between Nishiki and Kiryu in the show is a far cry from the meaningful clash of brothers. For this alone, the cast and crew should have played the games just to understand why this fight means what it does in the narrative. It's not just two shirtless middle-aged men fighting for Yumi, it's two lifelong brothers who chose different paths to walk in life, and like many other final bosses in the series, it's a battle of ideals. Nishiki transformed while Kiryu lived through the sentence that he was supposed to take, and after Kiryu gets out, we see that Nishiki is no longer the same person he was before. The constant pressure and belittling that came with living in Kiryu's shadow made him a villain, while Kiryu maintained his morals throughout his 10 years in the joint. This culminates in the two battling it out to see whose will is stronger, whose path is stronger, and as we know, Kiryu's is. This adaptation fails not because it's a bad show, it fails because it's not Yakuza. Like a Dragon Yakuza, it feels like a separate piece of media entirely. For a series that has so much heart and character, the adaptation's biggest sin is having none. The Yakuza name means something. The new Like a Dragon name means something. It means seeing stories with characters that are flawed and imperfect, but at the same time are trying so hard to be the best people they can be above all else. It means fighting for the ones you love, even against opponents that seem untouchable. It means upholding your morals and will amidst powerful tides. This game series has proved time and time again that it means something. The biggest flaw of Prime Video's Like a Dragon Yakuza is that through it all, it ends up meaning nothing. And that's a damn shame.